Well, welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. One of our sweet spots within the business is not full restorations and not just a service, it's something in between. Recommissioning is quite a big part of the business, a reasonable percentage, and that means that we get a car in that has been idle for a number of years, hopefully stored in favourable conditions and not left to turn into a chicken coop, and to actually bring them back to life as cheaply and efficiently, but with an eye very much on quality as much as possible. And this car, it has never been a chicken coop. It's been very well looked after, even though it's been inactive for more than 4 years. And this is a Mercedes E500. Very interesting car, very interesting piece of German automotive history, and a very capable car. Probably one of the ultimate Q cars, as they're called, which looks fairly innocuous, but actually can slay giants on a B road. The backstory to this car was very interesting. I mean, I've heard a lot of Mercedes Benz technicians who I've known over the years say to me that the W124 and the W126 S-Class from the 80s/90s were amongst the highest quality, high production number cars that Mercedes have ever made. And I think they're probably right. I mean, these were developed to within an inch of their life, these cars. They really were. The interesting part comes is Mercedes-Benz decided that their image was a little bit staid in the late 80s. They had the 2.3 and then the 2.5 16-valve Mercedes 190s, which were a very good car. I used to service those regularly in the 90s, almost brand new ones. Great car. And they worked remarkably well with an automatic gearbox, actually. Mercedes-Benz decided to polish up the high-performance image a bit, and they came up with this car, which they decided to marry the almost identical to a newly developed V8, the 5-litre V8 from the W129 SL, 500 SL when it first came out. They decided to put that in this body shell with the ensuing hardware to make it all work properly. Then they came across a problem. Mercedes-Benz were awash with cash in the 70s and 80s. They hit a problem, and that was that the production line that had been designed to build the W124 on was only just wide enough to let the standard cars through. And by the time you'd put these subtle but ever so menacing looking flared wheel arches on it, they wouldn't actually fit down this body type W124's production line. And they thought, oh crikey, we've got a problem here. And also the front of the car had to be re-engineered to accept this 90-degree 32-valve 4-cam V8. They consulted Porsche. And Porsche had just stopped building the 959 hypercar as it was at the time. And Porsche were strapped for cash. The late 80s and early 90s weren't kind to Porsche. They did very well in the yuppie period of the mid-80s, but their products were beginning to look a bit tired by the late 80s. The 928 was soldiering on. It had been around a long time, and the 964 development of the 911 was a worthy car, but it was a sort of band-aid solution to the cars that went before, the Carreras, the G50 gearbox-equipped cars, the 911s of the very late 80s. Porsche were trying to make do and mend with these cars. Again, I remember speaking with Porsche engineers some years ago, and they said the 964 was the best they could do on the budget they had available. And the car really, the 911, refilled its own shoes some years later with the 993, the last air-cooled Porsche 911, which is a real landmark model, actually. Upshot of all this was Mercedes-Benz needed a financial shot in the arm. They had a production line that was effectively doing nothing, and they were not in a very good place financially. So the story goes, I don't know how true this is, but the Mercedes engineers are all based around Stuttgart, of course, in Germany. Mercedes engineers and the Porsche engineers were out one evening, and Mercedes said, oh, we're developing this new car, we don't know what to do with it. AMG can't do it because they haven't got the production facilities to turn these cars out in large quantities. They're still a very specialized company. And the Porsche engineer said, walk this way, Mercedes-Benz, we can help you. And so this interesting marriage was born between Mercedes and Porsche. And I think where we are located here geographically is very close to the Bentley factory at Crewe. Over the years, I've known people who've come and gone from the Bentley factory over many decades. And I remember on one occasion, the very clever Dr. Ulrich Eichhorn, who developed the Continental GT, he and Franz Joseph Pefkin, Dr. Pefkin, rejuvenated Bentley once VW had taken it over. And he picked up a BMW from by the private jet facility here. And he popped in to see me, as he did quite often. And I said, "What are you doing driving a BMW? You're the chief development engineer for Bentley." And he said, "Oh, we're always loaning each other development cars." And I thought to myself, these guys all out in a beer cellar or wherever they were, discussing Mercedes Benz and Porsche's future with this car, and all this BMW loaning VW cars and things. Is this one of the keys to the German motor industry's enduring success? I think it is, because they're prepared to talk to each other. They were prepared to a certain extent, change ideas, loan each other cars because they wanted to cooperate and evaluate. And it was a very, very different atmosphere to Britain, for example. And I suspect probably the US as well. I don't know how much of this cross-pollinization went on across the pond either. It was probably unique, actually. But anyway, the upshot is we got blessed with this marvelous car. As I say, it took the V8 from the 500 SL, largely, different injection system, slightly different cylinder block design, lots of subtle differences. And Porsche re-engineered the car. They put these wider wheel arches on to accommodate larger wheels. The whole front suspension was re-engineered to take the big V8 widthwise, and also lengthwise they had to relocate the battery to the boot and various other things. The net result of it was they came up with this. And the funny thing is, because the car sort of swung from Zuffenhausen, the Porsche factory, to Sindelfingen, the Mercedes Benz factory, all located in the greater Stuttgart area, these cars, I have it on good authority, these cars went from one factory to another as some bits were fitted, the dipping and painting, some other parts were prepped. Up to 15 times they made that trip between Sindelfingen and Zuffenhausen. And it's about 33 kilometers between the two. So it's quite conceivable these cars have done over 300 miles or over 500 kilometers before they even left the factory. Not under their own power, but there was a lot of, it's a bit like Airbus with wings in Europe. They bring wings and fuselages in from all over the place, different places. And it's not exactly the sweet spot of logistics, shall we say. But these were over twice the price of the 300e, the next model down at the time, with a 3-litre straight six, and with good reason. There was a very interesting left field interim model, which hardly anybody knew about at the time, called the 400e, or later 420e, which had a 4-litre version of this engine, a 4.2-litre version then. It did not have the flared wheel arches. It looked relatively standard, and that was even more of a Q car than this one was. These are very, very, very well constructed. They really did go to a lot of effort to make these as good as they possibly could. Very solidly engineered, almost unburstable, designed to sit on the Autobahn at 250 kilometers. Thank you very much, all day long. They'd do more than that if they were de-restricted or the gearing was changed. But this car has come in for a lot of different jobs to be done. As I say, it's been stood for a number of years. Our brief is to recommission this car and get it driving as well as we can, get the instruments all working on the dashboard. We're going to concentrate on the braking system and the fuel system. The fuel inevitably will be contaminated and very badly gummed up after that length of time, so we need to be very careful with the finely machined components in the injectors, etc. We've given the car just a basic clean-up. Once it's finished, I believe it's going to be entered in the next Hampson auction. But what a car. I've worked on these over the years. It's been a while. They're quite the subtle car, actually, but with a sledgehammer blow. The V8 got detuned, as did the Mercedes V12, in the 1993-ish. It got reduced from 326 brake horsepower to around about 315 because Mercedes-Benz decided to get rid of the full throttle enrichment on acceleration, which means that if the fueling is leaner than it should be to give absolute power, what you have to do is retard the ignition timing to stop detonation or pinking, and that means that you lose power. Because if the ignition timing, if the spark comes a bit later, it doesn't develop as much power because the position of the piston is different in the combustion chamber. So Mercedes did that to think about the environment and also to make them a touch more economical. They did the same with the 6-litre V12 that was in the 129 SL. That went from, and the 600 SEL at the time, that went from 408 brake horsepower to 392, I think, something like that, just because they got rid of the full throttle enrichment. Just why buy a very powerful 6-litre V12 and then have it detuned? There was obviously some logic for it at Mercedes, but supercar this, absolutely wonderful. I hope when we've done the work on this, it's going to be an absolute pleasure to drive. This is a real barnstormer, this car. The later cars went, the 500e, when this first came out, E was for Einspritzen, injection in German, as all they were, 230 TE, 300 CE, etc. And eventually, because so many of the cars, almost all of them were fuel injection, they decided the E was superfluous. So this car went from being a 500e to an E500. And that was how the E-Class was born. That was the birth of the Mercedes E-Class, when these had a facelift and the E moved from meaning injection to in between the C and the S-Class in the pecking order of Mercedes models. So it's a very interesting piece of Mercedes history. I give you the Mercedes 500e. Well, we've started work in earnest on this E-Class Mercedes as it is. We have a set procedure. So we look at the fuel system first of all, because more often than not, the fuel is contaminated in the tank these days. They have so much benzene and ethanol in them. It causes them to behave in very, very strange ways, modern fuels, when they're stood for a length of time. So it's a steel tank in this. Korrey's lowered the differential. We've got that out in order to gain access to the tank. The tank has been removed. We can have a look a bit more at that now. Well, Korrey, this is the business end, or part of it, of the... I keep getting this wrong because the early ones were 500Es. This is an E500, being the facelift one. I must remember that. And the fuel tank was red rusty inside, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite. There was probably a quarter of a tank of petrol left in it, so once I'd siphoned the fuel off from sort of the quarter level down, it was clean, it was okay, but above that, where the moisture's been allowed to sit, yeah, it's not corroded through the tank is solid, but there's that kind of surface layer of red rust. Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to do was brim the tank full of petrol and then drag all that through the pumps, through the filters, up to the fuel injection system. So yes, I've taken the tank out to deal with that.
Right. Okay. Great. Which is the right thing, the logical thing to do. Mm-hmm. This is the Bosch standard sort of Bosch roller cell fuel pump that was fitted on just about everything to do with K or Gaugetronic. Mm-hmm. And the inlet to that is taken straight from the tank, so you've got next to no filtration. And these can get noisy with bits of grit inside them.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't want that to happen if we can help it. And the petrol being 4 years old is obviously going to be a mess.
It's quite stale. So.
But you've had to remove the diff to get it out, the differential assembly. Mm-hmm. But apart from that, I mean, what amazes me is it's steel.
Yes, it is steel.
I would have expected it to be plastic. A lot of fuel tanks from the 90s onwards were plastic.
Yeah.
Pretty meaty exhaust system, obviously, to serve the 5-litre V8.
Yeah. I mean, to get the tank out, I've had to drop the exhaust a little bit and move the prop shaft back. And there's a central pipe that runs out the tank. This is the one you described that feeds the pumps here directly.
Right.
And that pipe itself was in quite bad shape, cracking, splitting, tearing. And it's got a union that threads directly underneath the tank, but I couldn't get to the union without taking the differential out. The access was just far too poor, and with that pipe still attached, you can't remove the petrol tank. I just couldn't get the movement on it to get it out the boot. So that's why I've had to go this far, although it looks a bit drastic.
No. I mean,
so it's got to be done.
It's almost, particularly with modern fuels, it is the first place to start is the fuel system, basically. If a car's, this has been stood for 4 years for various reasons, you've drained the oil out of it, because the other thing, the engine oil can coagulate on oil that hasn't been used. It can coagulate in the oil pump and things, which is very bad news. So we've drained that off. So your plan is we get the tank back.
Yes.
Refit it,
refit the new pipes, because all the fuel flexies, including the return lines and the flexies that that take the pump and send the fuel off to the front of the engine, the front of the car even, that was all cracking. So basically every flexi that's fuel related needs changing, new filter, tank back in. And I think what I'll do is I will fill the tank with fuel, and I've taken the pipe off that would feed the rail in the engine bay. I'll put that into a tub of some sorts and just prime the system to try and flush out anything before it enters the rail, before it enters the injectors, because I don't want to clog an injector. That would be a problem. So fingers crossed that will clean out any last deposits.
Great. Okay. Well, I mean, this was a very high-tech engine in its time. 4 valves per cylinder, 4 cam. You know, we want to take the path of least resistance as much as possible.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Great. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The brakes are the next thing. We make sure the flexible hoses and the metal hoses are serviceable, and then we check the brake calipers to make sure they're the rubbers on them, the dust covers actually tell us quite a lot about the condition of the calipers inside. You've encountered a problem with the rear brake caliper mounting bolt, and I mean, brake calipers are generally only held onto the hub with 2 bolts.
Which this is,
and that is an awful lot of pressure on two bolts. There's a lot of engineering there going on. But you've had a problem, haven't you?
Yeah, just replacing the brake flexes all round because they were all perished. So standard procedure, take the caliper off, fit the new flexi, put it back on. As I went to tighten up the top bolt, after winding it in by hand, it just started to go round on me. So I knew straight away that the thread was pulling.
Gone.
I had not even tried that hard and it gave up. So caliper off, and you have to look at it and try and assess what's the easiest way to get in there and retap a thread or put a helicoil in or something like that. Access from the back was no good because of the shocker in the way and the drop link, and that would have meant taking the entire hub assembly off, which is quite an in-depth job. So I've gone at it from the front, removed the caliper, removed the disc, taken away the brake disc guard, and I've had just about enough room with a little bit of fettling to get between the hub and the brake disc guard with a drill and a tap and a helicoil, and repair that with a brand new thread. And it's now tightened up and it's held perfectly.
Okay.
But it was quite tight.
Okay. Did we have the kit in stock?
We did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought we did, yeah. Amazing. I love it when a plan comes together.
So do I. It was close. I mean, if that had not had worked, I would have had to have taken the hub off, and there was no other way to get at it. Yeah. And like you say, it's such a critical point of pressure. It's got to be done properly.
Well, so a helicoil is a brand of it's like a closely knit spring that you tap the offending thread where it's gone out to normally a millimetre bigger bore, and then you wind in this thread insert with a little tool, and that actually becomes the thread again. In fact, it could be 2 millimetres bigger. Is it 1 or 2?
Well, the size of the bolt was M10 by 1.5, and I drilled it out to I think it was a 10.5 or an 11 mil.
Right.
I couldn't quite see on the drill bit because it had come off, but it was about a millimetre bigger, roughly, like you say.
And then you wind that in, and if you get it right, and if the material is okay and everything works properly, it's almost as strong as the original, or is as strong as the original fastener. It's all about getting the right feel when you're tightening it up. As you say, one instinctively knows if a thread's right or not when you tighten it up. You can feel bolt stretch, thread stripping, cross-threading, all these things, and normally you would tighten it up. They quite often have a self-locking solution, or we put some self-locker on there.
I've put self-locker on the helicoil before that went in, and I've put some self-locker on the bolt as well. Right. So there's no way that is moving.
This is just a liquid that we pour on, and it actually locks the thread into place. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I'm delighted you've managed to rescue that. That's fantastic.
So am I. You know, it would have been a big job. It would have been a big cost to the customer, and we're obviously trying to avoid that with this car. So that's got around that one nicely, I think.
Fantastic. Yes. Great.
Thank you.
The discs are in very good condition. They're just a bit rusty, so we blasted them and painted them. They're big discs on this car, as you'd expect. This is an Autobahn crushing super saloon from the 1990s, so you'd expect it to have big brakes, particularly from Mercedes Benz, and it does. Very big discs all round, actually, on this car. 4-pot calipers on the front, so we're going to rework all that, inspect it, make sure, replace or any perishable items, really. Put fresh oil, fresh filter in the engine. We'll gently spin it over to make sure it's free before we even start doing anything else. And the fuel tank will come back from being cleaned out and treated and coated. And then we'll reinstall that in the car. We will probably, as an extra layer of precaution, run a pipe from an external fuel source, a can, into the fuel pump, the high pressure roller cell pump on the car, just to make sure that it's absolutely running on a diet of fresh, good, clean, clear fuel. So that's what we're on with at the moment. Looking forward very much to getting this car back to life. It's a long time since we've had one of these in, few years. Yeah. There it is. Well, this is the first time this car's actually been out for a road test in the wild. We have an ASR light that's on. I can't remember what that stands for in Mercedes speak, but it's something like automatic skid reduction or something similarly Teutonic sounding. We need to sort that light before it goes for its roadworthiness test. We're just doing some shakedown miles first to make sure that it's actually roadworthy enough to go for a test. It's amazing, even already. It's a while since I've driven one of these. Okay, we've done work on them over the years. All Mercedes have that hewn from the solid feel about them, but this really does. It feels like a great big ingot of something with a wheel on each corner that's beautifully sprung and damped. It really is quite extraordinary. The level of composure is the word I would use this car has. It's just, the ride is reassuringly firm. It's in no way anything else. It's not intrusively so. It just waft along on a tiny bit of throttle, and that V8 it's currently doing 1700 RPM and feels all of a piece. To take delivery of one of these in the early to mid 1990s must have been something else. They were a very expensive car, of course, but a massive hike up from the 300e, the 3-litre straight six. We've done so much work on this car. It came in, hadn't been used for years, hadn't even been started or run. We've got it working nicely, very nicely. And that steering, again, it's so direct for a recirculating ball steering box. This is old school. These have been around since the 19-teens, the 1920s, this steering box. But it just feels, because it's so well weighted and because it's so high geared, small steering wheel inputs for quite large wheel angle changes, it all just works very well. And even pulling away in this car, you just touch the accelerator. It's slightly lighter weighted than Mercedes Benz throttles can be. They can be very heavy and very wooden, the throttle action on a lot of Mercs, but this, you just touch it and it's off. I'm barely touching the throttle there, and the engine wants to go. It really does. It's a magnificent engine, this V8. Of course, Mercedes-Benz did a lot with it. They did an extremely limited edition of this called the E600, which had a stretched 6-litre version of this V8 engine, and of course AMG used it as well. But I think it's time to open the taps and let this thing loose. Okay, here we go. hesitated a bit there, because this is the first time it's really had anything asked of it but it's getting better. This again was a slightly different specification engine to the 500 SL, the R129. This had fully electronic Motronic engine management, whereas the SL, I remember working on them when they were virtually brand new. I used to do 12,000 mile services on them in the 1990s, and it was a KE Getronic injection system. I'll just open that up again and see how it responds. Yeah, there's a hesitation there, which we will have to find. It's still fast though. No complaints on the power of this thing, but it's so refined. One thing that is very noticeable is the road noise is quiet on this car. The road noise in general has been a bit of a bane with Mercedes. One of the few things that the 116 S-Class could be criticised for in the 70s was its road noise coming into the cabin. Much more so than a Jaguar or a Rolls-Royce, but this one is quite quiet. I suspect the tyres have probably got something to do with it, because it's amazing how different tyres can sound. Certain makes of tyre can be noisier than others. I've even had some tyres that actually sound like a wheel bearing is going. It's so noisy. And I've been convinced, our old Passat estate that we have in the business, I thought to myself, oh, that wheel bearing needs to be changed, and we put some new tyres on it, bang, noise is gone. It quite often happens that, but again, it's just the sure-footedness, the greatness of this car, I'll use that word, that shines through. It's just an amazing piece of kit. This was a bit of a high spot of engineering for Mercedes Benz. This V8 can idle at sort of 500, 550 RPM very smoothly, and yet it has power right up to 6,000 RPM. Yeah, we've got a hesitation there. We will get to sort that out. This is the first road test, I repeat, so I'm not concerned about whether the car is perfect or not. It just has to be well on the way, and it certainly is that. So precise, the steering. We can just try taking it round. No body roll. Absolutely glorious. Bit of left foot braking. Again, I'm just being very light on the brakes because we've just done so much work on them recently. Just need to bed them in. This car is very, very nice. I'm quite impressed. It's a long time since I've driven one. A few years, probably about 3 years. This is a marriage made in heaven. Porsche and Mercedes Benz. Quite the collaboration. Oh, hello. There we go. The hesitation has gone. I'll just try that one more time, but I think just use and bringing the car back to life has actually got rid of that. There we go. Utterly smooth power curve. Some faults can actually be rectified just by use and road testing. A lot of these classic cars just don't get used enough. There we are. We've rectified the problem, seemingly. That is now a beautifully smooth power curve right up to 6,000 RPM. We'll turn it round on our test track and give it another go. Okay, let's see what we have. Yes, perfection. That's the rev limiter. That's okay. Beautiful. The car has just come back to life. Everything's been gently warmed through. This is a very nice car to drive. Yeah, I approve. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Please remember to subscribe and to like. It does help with the algorithm, and we'll be back with something else very soon.